avoid, like the plague, being identified with swine influenza. Yeah, that is not, that's really not. I mean, that giving swine a bad name. Swine influenza. Well, you know that Hong Kong really got up on arms here a couple of years ago when they had Hong Kong flu. Really, the Junior Chamber of Commerce there in Hong Kong. Yeah, they really got bugged. I mean, it takes years to outlive that. Hong Kong. That's what had that flu, right? Swine. Swine. By the way, before we go any further, you probably realize, of course, that we have a vast and largely enigmatic group of spies who report to us at all times. Some of them more regularly than others. We get letters from spies all over the country. Guys who used to listen to the show, women who used to listen to the show, and they go to different parts of the country, and they keep telling me what's happening in the various parts of the country, which is really it's like having a whole series of CIA agents. See, they're giving us often very covert information on what's happening in various parts of the country. And there's this one lady that moved up to Maine, and she sends me constantly various local newspapers in Maine. Now, I don't know whether you recently, since most of us here in the New York area rarely get a chance to read true country newspapers. Now, most of us read. Occasionally, a person will think, well, the Long Island News or something like that is a country newspaper, or the Bergen Record, These are suburban papers, but a really country paper. I mean, a really country paper. I'm not talking about the Eastern Pennsylvania paper. I'm talking about a country paper. And they really have them in Maine. And so I would like to give you just a little rundown of what's happening in various towns in Maine, according to one of the country newspapers up there, which shall go unnamed at this point. We don't want to give undue publicity to our agent, who's liable to be lined up behind the Bull Durham sign and chastised severely at the next bean supper. And so she sends me this, you see, and she says that most of these papers up there have ladies who are the local reporters for various little communities, see, and they send in their daily or their weekly or sometimes monthly column, what's happening in East China Lake, places like that, see. And so here's what's going on in Maine. This is just taken out of one issue of the paper. And they're not being funny. This is the news, see. For example, East Hebron. In East Hebron, during a heavy thunder shower, August 12th, this is she just happened to have this paper, so she sent it out. August 12th, lightning struck twice at Thelma Lower. The first time, it put her telephone out of order, blew a fuse, and started a fire in an outlet which she put out. The next time, it struck the corner of the house, ripping a small section of finish board, starting a fire in the shed chamber, which she discovered immediately and put it out by throwing water on it. She was alone at the time and had to walk all the way to a neighbor's to use the phone. Here's a news note from Sweden, Maine. The Summer Youth Pet Show was held on the lawn at the town hall. Over a dozen pets were entered in the show. June's cat, Marty, was the only cat there with double toes, who sucks his toes. Beryl Craig's cat was the only cat who kisses noses. She received a prize for that. In Brownfield, Maine, on Wednesday, I went over to Stowe to attend a church meeting. I was 20 minutes early, so I stopped in to visit with the Tarbells, only a stone's throw away. Gwen and I had a real heart-to-heart talk, and we found out that whenever she sees a pug dog, she thinks of me, and whenever I see a frog, I think of her. Ha ha. Upton, Maine. Saturday, Ed Brennan helped Roland Bernier dress off a couple of pigs. Emo Bernier had a lady barber in the other day, and she trimmed his long hair and beard right off. And Sunday evening, Fred Judkins mowed the family plot in Upton Cemetery. In previous years, the town maintained the cemetery. Now they need some goats to get it trimmed off. How's that for local Maine news? Now, of course, about this time of the year, you see, it's springtime, and the mind begins to think of places like Maine. Now, you may not think of Maine for years, but when spring comes, you think of these things. And before I go any further, I'm going to mention briefly here that this program, this show tonight, is about a very special issue of high import to many of us in this world. Where do I get this? Okay. I'll read the opening line. Listen to this. All set? It had been a year and a half now, and I still had not caught him. Hook? Yes. Lord knows how many times I'd hooked that devil. I'd seen him only twice. And even if I never had, the things he had done to my tackle, the strength of him underwater, would have been enough to keep me coming back. 3 things gave him tactical advantage. The cover he called home, the water clarity, and his immense size. My fish, with what great conceit I called him that, lived in northern Lake Champlain on the Vermont side. He set up his defenses with a cave of rock rubble. The rocks were located on the perimeter of the remains of an old summer building, and that great fish lived there year after year, smashing tackle, summer after summer. The great bass of the cove. I'm telling you, if I have read one, because that's the story. I mean, that's the story. But let me tell you, every time spring comes, I think of something that I one time, when you have, in your lifetime, you have some extraordinary experiences. Now, I'm frankly admitting, I love to fish. I'm a fisherman. I love it. And I'm not a saltwater type. I just don't. I guess you never quite outgrow what you really were. From the time you're a kid. If you live in the Lake District, or you go to lakes and you fish in fresh water, that's your thing. I suppose occasionally people will make the transition, but it's not general. In my experience of freshwater fishermen remain, and they may go. I occasionally go saltwater fishing with people, but it doesn't have the same feeling. It's just not the same. I guess floating in a little tiny boat among the lily pads is an experience that you just don't get out in the Gulf Stream. With 12,000 miles of copper wire out, and some guy driving a boat that has 400 horsepower. And cost $15 million just to rent for 5 minutes. It's a whole different ball game. Just floating in the lily pads. One day, I had a lot of experiences. You want to hear some experiences fishing one day? All right. Enigmatic experiences. One time, me and my kid brother are sitting at the long end of a lake. There's a lake that was a long, thin one, and had a long, narrow bay that extended. There's a typical Michigan lake. Have you ever seen Michigan lakes? Well, Michigan lakes are often sandy bottom, heavy weed beds. Often the water is extremely clear. They're not necessarily always deep being in some cases they'll be 65, 70 feet deep at places. They run heavily to shallows. Usually at one end of the lake where a stream comes in that have a heavy growth of lotus or lily pads, and they have bass. Well, one day I'm floating in this boat. We had a rubber kind of a rowboat, the kind that blow up. But this rubber rowboat, it was a good one. And my brother's at one end of the boat, I'm at the other, and we are fishing for bass. Shallow water. We're just drifting. Now, when you drift for bass, or any kind of fish, you are making absolutely no sound, especially if you're using some kind of a rubber boat that just floats on the top of the water and doesn't cause any much ripple action or anything. We're floating along there, see. And it was a kind of a warm day. In fact, it was very warm, as it often gets in late July, early August, in places like Michigan and Indiana. High sun. And all around us were these farms. It was a farm just stretching off to one side of us then. We're just floating along on the lake there. Unbelievable peace. Now, when you're a kid and you're 12, you don't think in terms of peace. It was just quiet. And you could hear insects, the cicadas occasionally going off, and you could hear frogs once in a while peeping, and birds off in the distance. And we're just floating in the shallow water with heavy weeds just coming up almost to the surface. You could see these weeds moving back and forth with the slight current. This water is absolutely clear as crystal, and lily pads all around. My kid brother's sitting at the end of the boat, practically asleep. It's one of those wild experiences you get when fishing. Now, it's not necessarily a fishing experience. It's an experience, but an experience that you have when you fish is a special experience. Hot day, really hot. When all of a sudden, I notice off towards the west, there was kind of dark clouds. It looked like it might rain later. You know, during late July, early August, you get these sudden rainstorms in the Midwestern states. It'll just come out of nowhere, and it'll rain for about 10 minutes like crazy and pass and go. You know, that kind of thing. They really are thunder showers. You know, these dark clouds. So I didn't pay much attention because it was pretty far away. And we're just drifting along there. And we had gotten a couple of good strikes. And if you're curious what we were using, I was bait casting and using a surface plug. I was really into plug fishing. No worms for me. No way. And my kid brother was down deep in the boat at the end, sitting on the bottom. And he loved to troll night crawlers. He had a big night crawler on there. See, we're just drifting along on bait casting and plug casting, going away there. You're listening to a guy who, at the age of like 10 or 11, used to go out on the lawn and set up ball jars. You know what a ball jar, canning jar is? About 50, 75 feet away, and stand at one end of the lawn and cast towards ball jars, laying open, so that you try to put them right in the ball jar with a practice plug. I used to practice by the hour, just practice casting, and I got to the point where I could lay a plug at 50 feet, 60 feet away. I could lay a plug right on the top of a lily pad with no problem at all. You ever see a really great bait caster? I mean, I've seen bait casters like at sportsman shows. There was a guy that I saw here a few years ago at the Coliseum that could make his plug do everything but go out and get the paper, whistle Dixie, come back, read the news to him. Unbelievable. But a good bait caster is a real joy to see. Not spinning. We're not talking about spinning. I'm talking about the real bait casting with a Pfluger Supreme reel, 4-pound bait casting silk line, the real thing. And I used to use this stuff all the time, just practice. I got so I was very good. I've gotten a couple of strikes. When all of a sudden something happened, which to this day I have never forgotten. When, you know, most people who are, you know, there's a lot of kinds of fishermen, that's all I got to say. Just as many types of fishermen as there are bicycle riders. You know, there are people who get the $4,000 hand-built French racing bicycle, and there are people who walk around with little wheels strapped to their feet. You know, and all kinds of fishermen, all kinds of bike riders. And as a fisherman, I tend to be in fact, I'm almost exclusively an artificial bait type, flies, spinners, plugs. And various artificial baits. And so even as a kid, I was into this. And I used to make my own plugs. In fact, I remember one time I entered a group of plugs that I made in a Boy Scout competition for handicraft. I made these beautiful plugs, enameled. And did you know that there is a hobby of people who make artificial lures? And it's quite a hobby, I tell you. And they're dedicated. I haven't done that since I was a kid, but I used to do it all the time. But so here I am. I'm sitting at the end of the lake, and when I was a kid, of course, we only really could fish on a lake like this every couple of years. When my old man would go on a vacation there. Boy, it was fantastic excitement for me. It was just continual, just a turmoil in my gut, just because all year I had been reading every sporting goods magazine I could lay my hands on. Every Field and Stream copy I had been read 9, maybe 10 times. So I'm sitting on the back of the boat there, and I'm casting. It's a beautiful day. And I see this slight cloud in the horizon. I figure it's going to rain. Well, now that's a good sign for a lot of type of fishing. You know that some fish, particularly smallmouth bass, will often hit suddenly when rain comes. Just before and just after a rain. It has to do with barometric pressures and many different things. But they will, you see. So, wow, it's going to rain. So I'm looking over there, and Kid Brother's floating away there, just trolling his worm, and we're just drifting along. Well, now, up on the hill, overlooking the end of this lake, was a farmhouse. Those farmhouses just sitting up there, right on the hill. It was, in fact, a little bit like the picture that you see, that famous picture of, what's that New England painter? The one with I can't see you now. You see the little tip of your glasses over the top there, and the fact that your mouth is moving. Ryder. No, that's not Alfred Ryder. Anyway, the famous picture, he's on the tip of my tongue, the painter. He also has a son that paints. Nevertheless, I'm just drifting along, and there was this farmhouse. Now, we had been going to this same lake for ever since I was about 8, and here I'm now about 12. We've been coming there every year. And we knew, the whole lake and the scene around there, and we'd rent this cottage and so on. Would you please hold it up and tell me who he is? That's bothering me, the name of that painter. And I'm drifting along among the lily pads. Here it comes. Oh, you had to bring it in. Wyeth, of course. Andrew Wyeth. Christina's World is his famous painting. It's the painting of the girl on the hillside, and you're looking at her, and you're behind her, and you see her back, and she's lying on the hill, sort of half prone, and she's looking up at this house that's in the background, and it's called Christina's World. Well, this type of farmhouse was very common out in the Midwest, especially in Michigan, and there were a few apple orchards. They grew a lot of cherries and apples in that area, and a lot of corn. It's big corn country. And so this white farmhouse was sitting up on the hill there, and it was just a beautiful day, just gorgeous. And we're drifting along there, and I'm casting this plug. It was a red and white copy, which I had made, of a Bassarino, which is a South Bend bait. If any of you know the bait, it's a great classic bass lure. Whenever people draw pictures of a plug, they're really drawing a Bassarino, which is a plug with a fluted head. It's a diving plug. It'll dive maybe 4 or 5, depending on how fast you reel it, and up to maybe 3 or 4 feet under the water. It dives, and it's a red and white head, has treble hooks, and is a medium-sized plug. So I'm casting away there and concentrating like crazy, and because if you don't, you're liable to wind up losing a plug, and all kinds of bad news weeds and stuff. So I'm casting and dropping it at the edge of the lily pad, little realizing I was about to have a fantastic experience. Most great experiences in your life don't have omens before they occur. They really don't. And I'm casting away. My brother is sort of snoozing. He's just drifting off, and his line is trailing behind this boat. We're just drifting. He was really drift fishing. He wasn't really trolling. And he has a very light weight on his worm that he's trailing, so it doesn't really trail deep into the water. It just trails about 6 feet deep, and we're drifting along there. Not much is happening, and I've had a couple of strikes up to this point. Well, I cast near a log. There was a log that was laying out. By the way, logs are very important to cast around if you're casting for bass, because often a bass will lay in the shade of a log in shallow water. And you should always cast on the lee side of a log, and cast carefully. You don't want to make a big sound and that's the essence of casting, by the way, to make your plug enter the water with just a slight splat. Just goes tip like that. If it goes kablunk, forget it. But if it just goes plap, that attracts fish, because it sounds like something has fallen in the water naturally, like a mouse or maybe a bug, a large insect or something. You just tap. So I was dropping the plug, just tap. Well, I'm casting around this log. It's beautiful, just lovely day. And off in the distance, I hear this, just a little sound of rolling thunder. Well, now we were very close to shore, and if we really got into any trouble at all, with a tremendous storm, and we just paddle into shore, and that's it. And a few big drops. You could just see the storm coming up from the west there. And there was this huge hill, just a kind of a big sloping hill that went up, and this farmer had this white frame house with a couple of outbuildings, this big white house sitting right on the very peak of the hill. You're looking down at the lake. And it was there was nothing around. I couldn't see anybody up there or anything like that. And a couple of cows were wandering around down on the field, and it was very bucolic, and you hear this little thunder drifting along. Well, suddenly I got a slight touch. Something slapped at the plug, dropped the plug. Occasionally a fish will do that. A fish will just come up, see, because fish will not always bite because they're hungry. Remember, a fish will often bite because he's defending his area against something. Occasionally he will just strike out of instinct. Something lands right by him and he just hit it. So they'll strike for various reasons. The last one of which is he's hungry, especially a large male bass. A large male bass is very area conscious. If you've ever known anything about fish, you know that often a fish, particularly a game fish, is extremely territorial oriented. He will defend his territory, and often will stay in the same territory for years on end. And just anything that comes in that area is a goner. I mean, just, seriously. So he'll just strike at anything. Well, I just laid this plug down a couple of times, first on the one side of the log, and I'm drifting around the other side. I finally laid it in the lee side of the log, and something hit it, just like that, just slapped at it. And it was just a little ripple, and I knew that something had made a pass at this thing, so I carefully retrieved. Incidentally, many a bass will do this. As you retrieve the plug, he will follow it. And, just swim around and look at it and follow it. And one of the commonest of tricks that a bass will do, he will follow it right up to the boat and then take a slap at it. Just as you're pulling it in. You figure it's all over, this cast. You just, bam. Occasionally they'll actually hit one as you're bringing it in. I have actually seen bass when a guy has reeled the plug in and he's about to lift the plug out of the water. He's about to make another cast. A bass will actually leap out of the water and literally follow the plug almost right into the boat. And there are cases where a bass will strike at that thing, miss the plug, and land in the boat. Well, that's not often that it happens. But I was casting away there, and I drifting along. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'd hear this little slight thunder. And just as I laid the plug down on the second cast after this little boiling flick that the heat hit at it, this baby hit, a bass hit this thing. I'll tell you, it was like a minor atomic explosion. Now, many a bass, when he hits, will just pull a plug under. Other times, a bass will hit when the plug is being retrieved, and he'll come up from behind it and hit and swim. But this guy struck the plug and struck it from below. He hit it from below, and he literally vaulted out of the water. He just went boom. There was a big explosion. This guy flipped over about 3 times in the water and out of the water. Just giant white Vesuvius roared up there, and his baby hit the water. Just up like that. He just was barely hooked. He obviously had the plug, but he flicked his head 3 or 4 times, just shaking his head, and you could hear the plug rattling. Now that's something. When a bass, the plug, you hear the bass leap, and the plug is rattling, and he just somersaulted about 3 times and landed in the water with a giant splash, and he dove. So he dove down. My kid brother, what's the hell? He hears this great roar, see, and I said, get your line in quick. You don't want to have all this tangle, see. Well, at that point, the bass took off, and he scooted out towards deep water, which, by the way, many a bass will have worked out over the years various techniques for blowing a line. So he scooted out around the boat, headed for deep water. At that point, just as I set the hook, he turned around, came whistling back, leaped out of the water again, did a couple of big quick flips, and then he dove and headed for the log. You see, he's about to break the line. See, so he headed for the log, and I am having a fantastic time with this fish. And he went for the log. I'm hurriedly paying out line, you see, and at that point he leaped up again, just a great roar up like that. And just as he did this, I'm having the biggest fish I ever saw in my life. Just as he did this, there's a tremendous kaboom, just like that, off to my left, and I glanced, and just as I glanced, I see the farmhouse going up in what looked like a giant explosion. Fantastic scene. The farmhouse has been hit apparently by lightning. And as it hit, apparently there is a propane tank or something in there. This thing just went up like the most fantastic fireworks you ever saw in your life. It just went boom, and up it went like that. A great roar of flame. And I see, these cows are charging down the hill, trying to get away from this thing. It just frightened them. And I could just see this tremendous mushroom cloud, and this flames are bursting out of this house. At the same time, this bass keeps doing cartwheels in the water. And I can't believe anything. Well, just at that point, I could hear sirens coming from all over. Apparently, obviously, somebody had seen this happen somewhere else. Immediately put in the alarm, and the volunteer fire department. Now, in those little towns in places like Michigan, the fire departments are almost all volunteer. And there were a couple of little towns within a mile or so from this lake. And apparently the alarm went in immediately, and you could hear the sound of the whistles calling the volunteer firemen. Have you ever heard that sound? They go, ooh, ooh, ooh. It's going like that, and I hear this siren coming, obviously police or something. This place is going up in this fantastic Vesuvius of flame, and there I am. I'm looking over my shoulder. You see, I'm seeing a scene like I never saw in my life, and I look back. Every time I would turn to look at the house going up, you'd hear, oh, this bass, he didn't give a damn about the house. He is going up out of the water. Well, everything went to hell. I want to tell you, everything just blew up like that. The bass took off, went right under the boat, bent my rod down, kapow! My pride and joy. Dumb? Was that dumb? I guess total excitement, see. I had the brake on. As he went under that thing, he broke my split bamboo rod so neatly in half you wouldn't believe it. It was my pride and joy. I had bought this rod after saving for it for like 100 years. He just broke that rod, crackle, bam, like that. The house was exploding. I sat there in this boat, and at that point the storm rolled right down over the end of the lake, lightning playing among the trees, just like sparklers on the 4th of July. And my kid brother is scared out of his skull. He's about 2 or 3 years younger than I am, and he's scared. He's sitting there, let's get back. The house is blowing up, and I see these fire engines coming for miles around. They're approaching me. Oh, my God. I grab the paddle. I've got just the stump of my rod, and I go struggling in towards the pier, which our house that we had rented, the cabin, was about a half mile down the lake there. And I could see my mother out. By now, everybody in the lake is alerted to this fantastic explosion. And I'm paddling back, and there's my rod busted. The old man is standing out on the pier. He says, what are you doing out there in the rain? Why are you out there in the rain? Are you stupid? You come back. And I said, no, well, I can't tell you what happened out there. I couldn't know. And he sees my rod. He says, now look at that. You broke your rod on top of everything else. It was probably the single greatest moment that ever happened to me in fishing. The rod, the plug, the explosion, the lake. Incidentally, curiously enough, my kid brother never liked fishing after that. He really never did. To this day, he says, And now, at this point, every time I go fishing and every time I cast a plug out there, I expect all hell to break loose. And it's going to one day. Again, I know it. I will probably have just cast a river rut when the first nuclear bomb goes off. You like that name, River Rut? By the way, they have great names for plugs if you're curious about some of the names. How about Hawaiian Wiggler? You like that? How about the Daredevil? Not Daredevil, but the Daredevil with a T, Daredevil. River Rut. How about the Pikey Minnow? Or the Jointed Pikey Minnow? The Wounded Minnow? How about the Sexy Mouse? This is WOR New York, and, if you'd like to lay a few plugs out in the water like that occasionally, be my guest. Stay tuned for In Conversation.